Good afternoon again, everyone. Welcome to Marquette University Law School. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues, our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people who are doing interesting, important work in this region and beyond. Today, we are joined by the co-chairs of the education initiative, Milwaukee Succeeds. Seated next to me is the Chancellor for the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Mike Lovell. Chancellor, good to have you here. Seated next to Chancellor Lovell is Jackie Herb-Barber. She is a member of the Greater Milwaukee Foundation Board. I think she told me today she's a member of 10 boards now, or 11. It is hard to keep track, isn't it? I know it is. She is an engineer by trade, a Milwaukee product, MPS product, and she, I can't believe she's retired, but she has retired from Motorola after a distinguished career as a global sales account manager. And seated next to Jackie is John Schliffsky. He is the CEO of Northwestern Mutual. Let's give him a warm welcome to Marquette University Law School. Well, my guess is there are probably quite a few of you in this room who are familiar with the Milwaukee Succeeds initiative, but probably some of you are less familiar with it. So I just want to spend a couple of moments on what this is all about. And I'm going to direct the first question to Chancellor Lovell. Give us an idea of who all is involved in this initiative and ultimately the goal here.
Okay. Well, really, it's a cradle-to-career initiative where we're talking about helping students be prepared when they enter education all the way through graduating, whether it be college, 2 years associate degree. And so when we think about who all is involved in the process, the pipeline from that stage, it's really the whole community is involved. And so when I look around the table when we have Milwaukee Succeeds meetings, I get excited because I see all the people there that we need there to make sure students are successful. So that's the end goal, is students being successful no matter where they come from, what walk of life, in the city of Milwaukee.
And when you say all folks are at the table, what do you mean by all?
I mean, community organizations. You have the higher education, you have industry, you have organizations, sport organizations, when you think about nonprofits, just anyone who is really there to support not only educational, but the life of these children.
Ambitious goals, Jackie Herb-Barber. I mean, success for every child in every school, from cradle to career. Why do you think this initiative can succeed where, frankly, some in the past have not?
I think it's because all the people are at the table. I think because we have business, we have the community, we have nonprofits, we have service deliverers, and I think that is what makes us different. And everybody realizes that we're only going to get one more shot at this, and this is it. So we need to all work together to make a difference in the lives of the children.
John Schliffsky, you're from the world of business. The idea in business, I think, is to have a good idea, to have everybody on the same page and execute the mission. How challenging has that been in the first couple of years in the existence of this program? Because you do have people who have strong opinions about the direction of education in this community.
Right. Well, the good news is that we all agree on where we want to go. So that covers 90% of the waterfront. In other words, we're talking about all the kids in Milwaukee. We're not making any calls about whether it's choice, charter, public schools, parochial schools. So we're focused on all the kids, all the schools. And so the real debate is on tactics and how do we execute against that. And there's a lot of good ideas. And when you look at one of the things that struck me about Milwaukee is that there's so many good ideas. It's sometimes difficult to know which ones are really working and which ones are maybe well-meaning but aren't having quite the success. And so one of the things that I think Milwaukee Succeeds will bring to the table is sort of this notion of using data to analyze all the different things that are going on and maybe cut through some of the politics and find out what are the best things that are going on and how can we replicate the things that are working in maybe one or two schools or in a community across the entire city.
As you got involved, Jackie and Mike, as you got involved in this, how important was that aspect of this, that it's data-driven?
Well, I think from the very beginning, the reason why I agreed to this, because it was very data-driven and very action-oriented. So this isn't just a plan we're coming up with. We're going to take data and actually go in and take action to remediate. We're going to look at the pipeline and where we're losing the students and actually then strategically put in resources to help fix where we're losing the most students.
Jackie, you're an engineer. You're a numbers person. I mean, that had to appeal to you.
That was the main reason, one of the main reasons, because it was data-driven. So it was really the focus on numbers and seeing what's real, not on someone's feelings, but on some actual data that can make a difference in children's lives.
Go ahead.
I would say one of the very exciting things for me is GE Healthcare has stepped in with a number of resources for continuous quality improvement. So utilizing some of their Six Sigma and other techniques to come in and help improve things in school systems and even in the classroom where they're making an impact.
I think that's a point I wanted to echo, which is the fact that it's data-driven means we're not just getting together and coming up with solutions and implementing them. In fact, and so sometimes it feels like our progress is slow, but it's because there's a deep analytical undercurrent to what we're doing, and we think long-term that's going to create more sustainability around what we're trying to do rather than maybe something that looks like a quick hit but isn't really sustainable over time. So I think the data has all sorts of positive aspects, including this notion of sustainability over a long period of time.
Do you have all the data you need, or do you need more? Will you be looking? I know you've done some things so far, but do you need more to really get the measurement that's necessary?
Well, we've generated baselines, and I think that is the first step. But obviously, as we become more mature, we're going to continue to address more data so we can make more broader impact in other areas than we're currently looking at right now.
Mm-hmm. I want to, before we get to some of the numbers, and the numbers I think for our kids in Milwaukee are, I think the word of the report that Milwaukee Succeeds put out was daunting, and I want to talk about that in a moment. But before we do, I want to get your perspective on where we are, a general perspective. Let me begin with John Schliske. You're a business guy. You run a very successful company in this town. You need a pipeline of talent into this town. Why did you take on this assignment? Is it directly related to what you see from the perspective of a business person?
Yeah, I think there's two main reasons that both me personally and Northwestern Mutual has decided to get involved in this. One is the notion that from just a pure pipeline of educated workers who can satisfy the demands we have as a growing company, we're a little deficient in Milwaukee. And then when you look at some of the demographic issues around the retirement of the baby boom and the fact that even at our company, we expect over the next several years to be looking at replacing 15 to 20% of our workforce as the baby boom generation ages out and retires. I mean, we have a strong demand for a workforce, and so we have a keen interest in creating talented people who can work at our company. But there's a second reason that I think is equally important, which is that you probably saw we just announced a new building in Milwaukee. So we're committed as a company to Milwaukee, but you cannot have a vibrant, successful urban city if you don't have a public education and a private education system within the city limits that is successful. And so even if the workers weren't an issue for us, I'm just worried about the fate of Milwaukee as a city, and I think this ties into that nicely.
Jackie, you're shaking your head. I mean, you have strong roots in this community, as do I. I think you're a Custer High School graduate, as I recall. I went to John Marshall on the northwest side. I think we had a better football team or something, but
I don't think so.
No, absolutely not. But anyhow, you went to MSOE here in town. You care about the future. You volunteer in schools today, I should say. Talk about the personal aspect of your involvement in this.
For me, it was really about the kids. I think every child should have the same opportunities that my kids have. When it's time for them to go to college, they should be able to decide what college they're going to, rather than the college choosing them. So if we prepare the students to have the best of their ability, and if they're able to graduate, and if they want to go to UWM, Marquette, Harvard, wherever it is, they should make the choice. And the school shouldn't choose them. And in order for us to do that, we have to make sure that they're educated to the fullest, that they have the highest ACT scores, that they understand and comprehend, whether it's math, and I'm a math person, so I want everybody to be an engineer, of course. But whatever it is, that they have the ability to go and do whatever they want. If they have the ability to get into Marquette, UWM, however, they want to go into cosmetology, at least let's educate them to the level, to the best of their ability, so when they do go into cosmetology, they have that business background that they can go on and go to UWM and get their 2-year or 4-year degree after that. But let's make sure that the kids have best educated. And that's really the reason I did it. I want kids to be able to go into engineering, especially women, math and science. I think it's so important. The door is just open. You can have a very nice living being an engineer.
Give me the perspective of someone who runs a major urban university. What do you think of where we are and the need that you see?
Well, obviously, and I want to reiterate what John said, one of the reasons why we're involved in this, and I'm personally involved, is because we realize the city will never reach its potential unless we have a vibrant educational system. And so when I look at right now the challenges we face on our campus, over 50% of the students that come to our campus each year need remedial work, either in math or in English, or sometimes both. And so we obviously, students that need remediation, their likelihood of graduating in 5 or 6 years goes down significantly. And so we want to have an educational system so when they come to our campus, they're taking classes for credit at a high level, and so they can graduate in 4 years.
I want to spend some time talking about one of the features of Milwaukee Succeeds. We've been talking about data. And what you've done is each year you've been issuing something called a milestone report. And this looks at some key metrics, I think, for success and where we are and where we need to be. And I want to talk about a couple of them here and what's being done to address them. And pardon me as I put on my reading glasses. It's hell getting old, let me tell you. Here's one of them. It says more than 84% of Milwaukee third graders are not proficient in reading on the Wisconsin Knowledge and Concepts exam. 84% not proficient, 76% not proficient in math. That's third grade. When you saw those numbers, did that surprise any of you?
Well, I don't know if it surprised me. It shocked me. I mean, it's not something that's acceptable as far as I'm concerned. We can't have an entire city where those kind of numbers are repeated year after year after year. They just won't lead to the kind of talent pool, opportunity, ambition, and city that we all want. So I don't know if I was surprised by it. As sort of a newcomer to this whole space, I can just tell you that when I read those, I thought our work is really cut out for us. I mean, we are really starting something that's, I think, going to have a huge impact, but boy, there's a lot of work to do.
Actually, I was a little depressed when I first saw the baseline data. And I often described it, we're not in this for a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. This is a 10 or 12-year effort to really is going to move the needle to where we want it to be. We talk about only, 14 or 16% are proficient in third grade. Our short-term goal over the next, 6 or 7 years is just to get into the 30s. That's still not acceptable in my mind. We want everyone to be proficient, so it's going to take a long time.
Jackie or Barbara, what was your reaction when you saw those numbers?
I was surprised. I didn't think they would be that low. But based on the volunteer work I do in Metcalf School on 34th and North, anybody wants to volunteer, please come. There's a lot of work to do. Our kids are not on grade level, and I would say the upper grade levels, sometimes they're 2 or 3 grades behind on reading grade level. So we have a lot of work to do. I just really was shocked, though, that the numbers were so low.
One of the things that the numbers say to me, though, Mike, is that and there's a few people who have said, the way the numbers were gathered maybe wasn't accurate and all this stuff. But I think what they set us out for is a baseline. And so whether they're good or ugly or something in between, what we're really trying to do is improve those year after year after year after year after year. So it's not only maybe shocking that they're so low, but what I'm more interested in is not how low they are when they start, but how much incremental progress we can make every year. And that's sort of the way I think the three of us are looking at this thing.
Mm-hmm. What's the goal here? My sense when I look at what Milwaukee Succeeds is trying to achieve, it's not that we're saying we need to be the best. It's that you're saying we need to be significantly better. Is that a fair assessment of what the goals are?
Yeah, I think so. And again, we're not going to solve this problem overnight. There's no silver bullet. And so, again, it's just continuously improving. And it's not going to stop after the three of us are long gone. We hope it continues. So Milwaukee can someday be looked at as a model for urban public education.
Give me a sense of what you would do or what you are doing to address third grade reading scores such as those. As Milwaukee Succeeds already have a game plan in place on what needs to be done to improve those numbers? Anybody want to jump into that? Or?
I'll start at a high level. Jackie probably knows the details better than I do. I'm not trying to dump it on you. One of the things that I get in the community about Milwaukee Succeeds is, boy, you're kind of 2 years into it, and we haven't really seen anything yet. And we are developing a game plan, to go right to your question. But what people have to understand is that the way we're getting to a game plan is really a lot of hard work. And it reminds me of sometimes some of the continuous improvement stuff we've done at Northwestern Mutual. And I've been on some of these teams, and you go to the first meeting and you want to jump right to the answer. But the real way to get to something that's sustainable is to really grind through things. And this is where the black belts from GE and go through a Six Sigma process that really gets at the root causes and how you deal with it. So while I think game plans are coming around, for instance, on third grade reading, we still have a long way to go to get to the final answer on some of this stuff.
And some of the things we're doing with the tutoring, we're looking at making sure we have the right tutoring for the right kids. There's a lot of tutoring in the system right now, but we don't think it's necessarily the best tutoring for the level of where the child is. So if we have a child who needs remedial tutoring, but we're giving them basic tutoring, it's not going to help. So we're looking at finding ways, and we have found ways, to map out what tutoring should be with what child. So we're not double tutoring some kids and other kids aren't getting tutored at all. We're also looking at coaching teachers on how best to deal with issues in the classroom with respect to reading and tutoring and mentoring the kids. So those are two of the things that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. But there's also this notion around third grade reading and tutoring of how it has to be holistic. So it can't just be an in-school program. There's got to be after-school support. There's got to be at-home support. And this is one of the things that's coming around this tutoring is that when you look at how tutoring is developed in Milwaukee, sometimes an organization only sort of focuses on one thing. And we need to have a more holistic approach to reading. It can't just be something you do an hour a day. At the end of the school day, it's got to be more comprehensive than that. So that we have had some wins in that respect.
And coaching the parents, so teaching parents how to work with their children, and how when they come home with the homework, and just being better consumers of education themselves. Mm-hmm. So those are the three main focus areas that we're working on.
8th grade scores were fairly similar to the third grade scores. I want to ask you, Mike Lovell, about the ACT tests, and everybody in this room knows that you need those to get into most colleges. It says merely 36% of Milwaukee high school students taking the exam demonstrate readiness for post-secondary programs in at least one content area. That's compared to 82%, both statewide and nationally. So 36% compared to 82%. That goes to your point earlier that 50% of the kids need some help when they get into college, if they get into college.
And so the average ACT score from students from Milwaukee is a 16.2, I believe, where the state average is 22. You can see what a hurdle that is for them when they do try to enter a college campus if they're just not prepared, to come in ready. And particularly for underrepresented students, that's where the biggest challenge we are facing, as a city is.
Give me a sense of what else you would like to know about how our students are performing. Do you want to know more about high school graduation rates? Do you want to know more about who is actually going on to college? Are those things that you all want to be seen in future reports so that we have a better handle of what kind of success we are having?
And actually, one of the things we're very concerned about is the readiness to enter the educational system. The immunization, whether they need glasses, all the things to have them prepared so when they do enter the door, they can be successful. We've heard stories about, we've had people go in and look at students that are in first or second grade and look at their eyesight. And one story came back that 2 students were almost legally blind and trying to learn in a classroom. You can imagine what a challenge that would be for them, not knowing any better because they never had their eyes tested.
And child care. And talking about readiness, that's one of the goals, too, is to get more kids into early childhood learning.
That is very important. I volunteer in a K-4 classroom, which is very exciting. I was there this morning. Hopefully I don't have any spots on me from the top. But we do have a number of kids that come in who haven't had their immunizations. Now, they're not supposed to start, so they get delayed. We send them back home, and then they're able to get in. But we had a child who wasn't able to see the first, basically, 4 months of the school year. We didn't know until they had the free glass check. So they had the free eye check, they got free glasses, but we always had the student in the front row so she could see the board. But when we moved her to the back row, we would ask her a letter and she would say, well, I can't tell, I don't know. And we had her have an eye exam and she was 30, 60 or something? It was something ridiculously low.
I want to talk about something that's a sensitive issue in this community and an important issue, and that is racial disparity. Some of the numbers that I've seen here and some of the tests that have been done show just and it's probably not a surprise to many people in this room, but a tremendous gap in achievement rates for white students and students of color in Milwaukee. How difficult is it to tackle an issue like that? That is an issue that, frankly, has been a vexing one in many cities around this country. Can we Can we tackle that? Are there ways of approaching that? Is there a track record of success somewhere that we can borrow that would apply to Milwaukee?
Well, we do know that programs similar to Milwaukee Succeeds have worked in other cities around the country. So that's one of the things that attracted me to Milwaukee Succeeds is the fact that we've seen this program work in other urban areas that had similar racial issues and things like that. The other thing I would just comment on briefly is the fact that our approach at Milwaukee Succeeds is because everybody's at the table, it's meant to break down some of those barriers. I haven't seen a discussion yet where a racial issue was a cause for making a decision or not making a decision or moving forward or not moving forward. So I think somehow by having this sort of convening nature of Milwaukee Succeeds, it brings everybody together each with their own unique perspective, including racial perspectives. I think we've been able to overcome some of the maybe initial roadblocks that might crop up in that kind of minefield that you walk through.
Mm-hmm. It's a tough one, isn't it, for anybody in the field of education?
No, I think so. And, we have similar challenges on our own campus, that we are always trying to ensure that all students have equity, and making sure we treat everybody the same and they all have the same opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Give me a sense of your hopes for the next few years of this. Many of these goals are for 2020, but as I think you pointed out, John, there are going to be people probably in the next couple of years who are going to say, is there progress? Where's the progress? How much pressure do you feel under to have something that you can demonstrate as things are moving in the right direction?
Well, I think the three of us are all action-oriented people. You even mentioned it, Mike, when you were talking earlier. And so I'm getting impatient, to be honest with you. I'm not getting impatient in the sense of feeling like we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, but I am getting impatient in that every school year that goes by, is a lost opportunity. So, but I do believe that the groundwork that we've laid is I don't know if complete is the right word, but it's coming to fruition. How's that? And I do think you're going to start to see some meaningful outcomes that we're going to start implementing that'll start moving the needle. And again, I just want to make this point. It's not important. What we can't do is look at the 2020 goals and say, oh my God, we're not there yet. What we have to do is say, how are we going to make progress in the 2013-2014 school year? And let's just take it one school year at a time, because otherwise I just think there's too much. The road looks too difficult to travel.
Mm-hmm. And I would say at our last leadership council meeting we had from Milwaukee Succeeds, we had people working on the third grade reading come to presentations on what they're doing. And I was really heartened by the fact that there are literally hundreds of people out in the community right now working on these initiatives and making progress. And I think we are going to see a year from now when we measure, the needle is going to be moved just because there are so many people involved.
So you're pretty optimistic that the next few years we'll start to see some real signs of progress.
And I think that was one of the challenges, because to get the framework set up for this organization took time. And I know when we announced Milwaukee Seeds, people want to see, well, what are the results? What are the results? Well, I think now we have everything set in place that we're going to start seeing those results.
I think you wanted to say something earlier.
And I did. Going back to your previous question, I think we have some local examples of some successes dealing with the racial issues with students in schools. So we have our own, right in our own backyard, that we can call upon. So I think using these successes that we've had in the different pockets of the people on the different networking groups, I think we're going to see success much sooner than we thought, because we're going to start to implement these. And it really is a marathon. I was a sprinter in high school, so I ran those really short races and I always looked up to the distance runners. But that's what we are. We have people running, it's a distance. It's running the mile. It's not running the 100. So I think if we call on the expertise that we already have in the community, of, they're in their pockets of schools that are doing some great things. I see Dr. Fuller in the audience, that we can call on them and we all can collaborate. So if I think about networks when we first came in, everybody had their own idea, and their idea was the best idea. And if we go into a network now, so a year and a half later, everybody's saying, what's best for the kids? I know my program is great, but I'm not getting the same results that A is getting. So maybe I need to look at something different. So I think that's what's going to make the difference, is everybody getting together and saying, we need to do what's best for the kids, not what's best for our program. Because in the end, it will be best for all the kids and their program.
The other thing I've noticed, Mike, is that I don't know if it's just good luck or the words getting out of Milwaukee Succeeds, but the number of people I've run into who have said to me, in the business community I'm talking about, who have said, I want to do something with education in Milwaukee, but I really didn't know how to do it. And I didn't want to just fund a specific school or specific program because it seemed so micro-oriented. I wanted to do something more macro. So the other thing that gives me optimism around our progress, to your question, is that I think we're starting to be a vessel that people can channel their resources in. So, there's a little bit of a Rolling Stone kind of thing. It seems to be moving a little faster and faster, and I think that's going to pull some more people into it. So that's kind of cool.
I touched on this earlier, but I do want to come back to it. The fact that you do have folks who have different views of what's been called the education ecosystem. How do you keep them all together, all on the same page? Or is it not as big a deal as maybe people like me make it out to be?
Well, I think metrics and data are the great truth teller, right? So, I mean, the way that the process works with these networks and the analysis that goes into it and the facts staring you in the face are a real way to get sort of people beyond sort of a personal opinion or a society viewpoint and go, well, you're right, that this has a bigger impact than that, or boy, this thing, when it's linked with this thing, has a geometric impact rather than an arithmetic impact. And so I think the data, same thing's true in the work world. Everyone comes in with an opinion. Ultimately, data is the language that decides winners and losers, and I think we're starting to see that in the education sector.
What, and I'm going to open this up to questions from the audience here in just a moment, but give me a sense of whether or not, and this is a touchy subject, and maybe the three of you aren't the best people to ask this of, but the funding for this kind of thing, it's not inexpensive to do this. When you announce an effort like this, there is a lot of excitement, but then you have to kind of continue on. To use the long-distance runner analogy, it takes a while to get to the finish line. Is the enthusiasm still there in the community about this idea that can drive the resources that are necessary to help you succeed?
Well, I can just talk about, in my institution, how many people, we have dozens of people on the campus that are involved in helping drive, implementing some of the things we're putting forward. And those people are all very excited to be trying to make a difference. It's what we do as an urban institution in trying to help the city succeed.
More about people than even dollars, volunteers?
The one thing I'd make, and I echo Mike's comments on volunteers, our foundation is starting to get more and more people in our company say, wow, I'd like to be part of that organization and volunteer my time, not just my treasure, so that's a good thing. But one of the points on the dollars, Mike, that I think is worth mentioning is that one of the things that attracted me to Milwaukee Succeeds is it wasn't like we were going to do this big fundraiser and bring in extra money and somehow solve a problem. Hopefully, a lot of what we're doing is just reallocating resources that are already being spent. And so this is the notion of rather than funnel money to this organization or this thing that doesn't work as well as this, let's bring that organization in here, take the same amount of money and get more bang for the buck. So it's this, we are going to need money. Okay, let's be clear. We're going to have to raise money for Milwaukee Succeeds. We're going to have to grow our budget. But at the end of the day, this is not meant to be just solely dependent on new funding. Some of it's reallocating existing resources.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people in this room today, which tells you something. And I think it tells you that there are a lot of people who care about what happens to the future of education in this community. What do you say to the people in this room? How can they help in the effort to better the education outcomes for all our kids?
I'd say get involved.
Volunteer?
Volunteer. Everyone in this room can be an advocate for someone. Think about a person you know who really doesn't know how to be a consumer of education, whether it's a neighbor, maybe it's one of your employees, maybe it's a coworker. Help them when they get ready to go to parent-teacher conference. Give them some ideas of what worked with you if you have children, what worked with you when you were a parent. One of the other things I do, and I volunteer 15 to 20 hours a week at Metcalf School in a K-4 classroom, and I stay in the same classroom. So the kids that are in 4th grade and 5th grade, they know me as they've come through the ranks. One of the things I always tell the young kids is, I want you to read or be read to at least 15 minutes a day. I know I've made a difference when a child comes to me, a 4th grader, and says, Mrs. Barber, I'm reading to my little brother 15 minutes a day. My follow-up comment to him is, 15 minutes isn't enough when you're in 4th grade. I want you reading for 45 minutes. 15 minutes can be used for your little brother, and then the other 45 is for you. But it's just little things like that. Things like talking to parents and telling them that children need to be in the bed by 8 o'clock. I always tell them, put your children to bed by 8. So, and then whatever happens, by 10 o'clock, they're asleep. At the beginning, it's going to be tough, but by 10, they're asleep, and you can have the rest of the night to yourself. Because those kids come to school, and they tell me everything that happens in the house. If they're asleep, they don't know what's happening. If they're awake, they do. And the other thing I always encourage them to do is, and we're a year-round school, so we got some little Fisher-Price toys. We call them toys, but they were really like a leapfrog, but a very inexpensive leapfrog. And we send them home with the kids during the extended breaks. And we tell the parents, allow them, or caregivers, because they're not all parents, allow them to spend 15 minutes a day with their leapfrog or their Fisher-Price smart tablet. And it's amazing. We did this, and at the end, before Christmas, we gave them, and then they came back in January, and we showed there was a 50% improvement for the kids who had used their smart tablets, as far as knowing their letters and their numbers. We can tell the kids that didn't use it. They never even came out the backpacks. So there's so many little things that you can do that you think might not mean anything, but it really is meaning something to those families. And I would just encourage you that if there was some tidbit of information that you had when you were a parent and you had a student, something like for me, I used to always tell my kids, we would get everything together the night before, it's by the back door, so we're running out the next morning. Parents tell me that they're late to school because they couldn't find a backpack, or they didn't have time to comb their kids' hair in time, so they're to school an hour late. If they would have done it the night before, they wouldn't have been late. It's amazing. In our class, we are not having as many tardies as we've had in the past. I don't know if it's because of what I suggested, but we don't have as many tardies. So it's just those little things that make a difference. And if you can just help parents out, because not all parents are parents like we were. Mm-hmm. And I realize that not every child that's in the class has parents like two engineers, my husband and myself. So they don't all have that. So we need to, I look at myself as a supplement. I'm like a surrogate in the classroom. I'm a mom when the mom's not there. And I think all of us in this room can do a little bit to make a difference in a child's life.
I would suggest that everyone be an advocate for education. I think when we think about all of the things, the challenges we're facing, not only as a state, as a country, in terms of resources, financial resources in particular, I would say that investing in education is the best way for us to get out of the situation we're in now. Because you think about the health care, the prison systems, better educated population, those expenses will go down for our state and our country. And so trying to get people to think long-term, investing in long-term education is really the key to not only success, really the success of the whole United States. So,
I'll give you a final word on this. I mean, what would you tell people in this room? I mean, obviously your company's involved, you're all in on this, but what can other folks do?
Well, as you two were talking, it reminded me when I was a young up-and-coming analyst at Northwestern Mutual, I worked for Don Schenke, who was a CEO way back when. And I was working on a special project for him, and he said, the beauty of Milwaukee is that it's just small enough that you can really solve these problems. It's not, and I believe that about this education thing. I don't think it is such a big city and such a huge problem that we can't make meaningful progress. And so I'd echo both what Jackie and Mike said, and maybe add this note of optimism and bring something to the table around, I'm going to help make it better, and be optimistic. Because I do think Milwaukee, the size of our neighborhoods, the size of our schools, the size of the problem is manageable if we all commit to it. And so that's kind of what I'd like to leave with all of you today.
I'd like to take questions from the audience, and those of you who've been here for past events know how this is done. If you're in the seating bowl, you can press down on the little microphone in front of you, press down on the rim, not on the button, just keep your finger down on it. But if you're in the back, we welcome those questions too. Just raise your hand, and Ryan, who has a microphone over there, will try and get to you. So please raise your hand, and we'll take as many as we can. Yes.
What interaction do you have with MPS, superintendent, administration, and school board, and are there any policies that are helpful or hurtful in that process?
Well, I'll go first. I spend a substantial amount of time with both Greg Thornton, who's the superintendent, and Michael Bonds, who's the president of the school board. I think they are, how could I characterize them? They are hopeful about Milwaukee Succeeds. We're trying to figure out a way for Milwaukee Succeeds to interact directly with MPS. A lot of what's going on at Milwaukee Succeeds right now isn't specific to a school or a school system, but eventually it will be. And I think they've been very supportive from a conceptual perspective. We're doing some pilots in certain schools right now that they are helping us push. And like any big bureaucracy, Northwestern Mutual, MPS, maybe UWM, it's hard sometimes when you're at the top to, you have a good idea and you want to see something, then 5 weeks later nothing's happened. So I think they're trying to figure out how to sort of adapt the big bureaucracy at MPS to Milwaukee Succeeds in some ways. But I'm very hopeful that we will be able to work with them sort of arm in arm on these problems. I don't think there's always going to be tactical issues, but I think conceptual issues are put to bed, and we're working really closely with them.
And I think it's important to point out that both Dr. Bonds and Superintendent Thornton are on our executive committee, our executive board, so we're making the high-level decisions on the organization. They're at the table with us making those decisions.
I mean, there's 80,000 kids in MPS plus or minus. We can't succeed in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee Succeeds can't succeed if MPS isn't part of it, right? I mean, they have to be part of it. Otherwise, 80,000 kids are, so we know that they are a key component to what we have to do.
And they are involved in the networks.
Right.
So within the 8 networks, MPS is involved.
Let's take other questions. Yes.
First, I want to thank you, Cal, for your discussion and the suggestions that you offered to improve education in Milwaukee. I'm Deborah McGriff, and I was former Deputy Superintendent of the Milwaukee Public Schools. I have I'd like you to talk about 2 things that are big national issues that will impact education in the city and in the country. One, Common Core state standards, which will raise and maybe lower by 30% in lots of other cities, the performance of kids. And second, improving teacher preparation programs, since research is very clear that the quality of teachers will have the largest impact on improving education.
Well, I guess I can start here. One thing that all 3 of us are big believers in are accountability. And so, we're not going to say that, we're not experts to say whether the core standards we're measuring are the right ones or not, but we all believe that holding all schools accountable to something, to some certain level, is something we're all in favor of. And it actually helps us, as we're a data-driven organization. It'll help us look at which schools are performing well, go in and find out why they're performing well, and maybe we can implement those in other schools, and we can be a conduit for best practices, across the city and actually maybe across the state. And, obviously being an institution of higher ed that has the most of our graduates are in MPS teaching, we have a really invested interest in making sure that not only the teachers that are graduating are using pedagogies that are state-of-the-art and the best, but helping implement new ideas into the existing workforce and teaching with MPS. And so that's another major reason why UWM is involved in this program.
I agree.
Other questions? Yes.
It seems to me that the Habitat for Humanity pattern is probably a good one to build into your structure so that the local industries buy into the program, encourage their employees to be the volunteer tutors in the school system, help them to have the tools to do what they need to do, and encourage all the industries in the community to participate in that. It seems to me that regardless of what plan you come up with, what Mrs. Barber has said is so important, and that is the one-on-one with the students. Coaching the parents, coaching the teachers. And I think in order for that to succeed, the community needs to buy into it. So we need to gather support not only from industries, but from the volunteer organizations in the communities.
Well, I don't know if that was a question or a statement, but I agree with what you said.
Thank you.
I love what you're doing. My question has to do with illiteracy being multi-generational. So the students who come to school now often are unprepared, as you stated. And if we are to look back a generation, we would likely see that in some cases the parents are illiterate. Is there any part of your efforts that may focus on actually educating the parents who have at least as much and potentially more influence than any teacher will ever have?
Yeah, and I think Jackie pointed this out. It's one of the 4 major thrusts of our 3rd grade reading. It's getting parents of teachers in K through 3 up to our reading level so they can actually read to their children when they're at home.
So we're working with Literacy Services of Wisconsin and I think maybe one more to see what we can do to help those parents out. And it's not just parents, it's really caregivers, because we're talking grandparents, aunts, uncles, whoever is taking, neighbors, whoever's taking on the kids.
Right. Other questions? Yes, let's go up in the back. Ryan, I know that's a long walk, but, if you could just hang on a second so everybody can hear your question.
Thanks. Sticking with the theme of accountability and data-driven, you're probably aware of the bill that is being considered in the legislature that would require the voucher schools to have the same testing and report cards that the public schools have, and I was just wondering if Milwaukee Succeeds had a position on that.
Well, I can maybe give a quick answer to that. There are 80,000 students in MPS. And when you take the choice in private schools in the city, there's 32,500 students. So it would be the second biggest school district. And so obviously, with that number of students, we would like to have the same amount of accountability for the 80,000 students in MPS and those in the other schools. So, I think that we all believe that all schools should be held accountable, because I think that's the way we can, as a Milwaukee Succeeds, can provide the most help in terms of sharing best practices.
Yeah, there's two interesting parts to your question. The first is the obvious one, and I think we all support some level of accountability across all school system. I mean, all schools within the city limits of Milwaukee, and to hold MPS to a standard and then say, well, these schools don't have to do it. It just doesn't seem to me that we're keeping score in a fair way. So yeah, we support that. But when I say we, this is my second point. I think, and I'm not speaking for Jackie, but we're talking about individuals. One of the things at Milwaukee Succeeds that we haven't really figured out yet is what is our role from an advocacy or a government lobby perspective. And right now we don't take a position on this stuff. And so it's important that you understand that what we just said is speaking as individuals. Now Milwaukee Succeeds has a position around accountability, but we haven't really weighed into specific bills in the Wisconsin legislature yet. And I really think at some point we're going to have to, but we're just not there yet.
There is risk to that, though, because you've got, again, different people have different views of the legislation being proposed.
Yeah. So we've stayed out of it more or less now, and it's not because we're afraid to stay out of it. We just don't have a muscle yet, a part of our process to help us figure out what's the best way to deal with a particular issue or particular piece of legislation.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Got one there.
My question is about the lean processes and other industrial engineering techniques you guys are talking about implementing with the schools. So you guys have talked about it at a really high level, and for lean, some of the stuff like the value mapping with producing good students from a low level, and utilizing wasted human potential in parents who don't teach their kids at home, stuff like that, utilizing the wasted time over summers of the leapfrog pads. That's all great, but does the Six Sigma, which is really heavily numerical, really heavily process-oriented, do we know that that's necessarily going to map to the unique interactions for each student in each classroom? Like with the tutor pairing, that's about, a unique student, unique classroom, unique tutor. Can we really replicate that with numerical methods?
I'm leaving this
very detailed.
Well,
I'll leave it on the mic.
Okay, so I'll do my best to answer your question.
Yeah.
So one of the things I was very, very encouraged by, again, at our last Leadership Council meeting, was we do have individuals trained in Six Sigma and Black Belt that are in the third grade classroom today and implementing strategies. And we heard back from the teachers. There's actually a video we saw from the teachers that said how they never thought this way and how much better they were in teaching the classroom and getting all students up to standard based on the techniques that were used. So I am encouraged that they can do that on an individual basis. And again, I think it's going to take some creativity by the individual teachers because every class is going to be different. But certainly, I think the process, and I think, being an engineer myself, I know that whatever you measure goes up, because you place emphasis on it and you do it. And so by them measuring certain things, indicators within their own classrooms, those things will improve.
I think we have a free advertisement for an engineering education up here on this panel, so go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about the bodies on the battlefield. No matter what you do today, each progressive grade that's going on right now needs some retroactive, shall we say, action. Are you, in fact, doing anything to deal with that issue as far as some plans or some networking or whatever you're doing?
I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying, are we doing anything with the kids that are in school now? Yeah, well, for sure we are. I mean, if you think about our three focuses, getting ready to go to school, third grade reading, and eighth grade test scores. We're not just going to wait for kids who aren't even in the school system yet to move the eighth grade test. So, I mean, we know we've got to move eighth grade test scores every year starting now. So, I mean, yeah, there's going to be stuff that's going on right now. That's another thing about Milwaukee Succeeds that I was drawn to, is this notion that we're not just dealing with the kids that haven't even entered the system yet. We're trying to solve this problem sort of on the run. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, and I would just say just because it's not part of one of the goals of Milwaukee Succeeds right now, as an institution like UWM, we are working on redoing the way we do remediation, working with the high schools to have kids. We're actually going to have our faculty going and teaching in the high schools and helping MPS students so that when they do graduate, they're proficient when they go through certain things. So we know that we need to address problems today that maybe we as Milwaukee Succeeds are not have made our priority yet, because we're going to continue down the path. But we certainly need to be action-oriented now. So we are an institution. I'm sure Marquette and other institutions in the area are doing the similar things.
And one of the things is, we talked about partners. So we have these partnerships. When we're coming up with goals and they're working on them, the organizations are changing the way they do things. So students are benefiting today based on a collaboration with others to say, well, if you're doing it this way and that worked better, let me try something different. So now we're seeing that organizations, and some of them are really bragging about it. When you look on their website, they say it, they're bragging about that they changed the way they've done something in the past. So we're affecting kids right now.
Other questions? Let me go here and then we'll go there.
If you're finding some of the strategies that the engineers have used, if you were speaking of the Six Sigma process, do you see a translation into teacher education, meshing that into current teacher education, if you're finding that you are currently having success using those strategies?
So the answer to that is yes. I think that as all institutions, particularly they're teaching the future teachers of the workforce, we're constantly coming up with new ways to improve the classroom. So if you talk to a teacher that's graduated today compared to a teacher when I was in school that graduated, it's vastly different. So I think we're going to continually evolve, and I think that we can look at Milwaukee Succeeds as a model for helping prepare teachers, particularly in an urban setting, the challenges that are faced there. And I will say that it's a continuous loop. So we're out there in the classroom seeing what works. We can loop back into the teacher's education as an institution. That's another reason why I think it's good for us to be involved.
Let me go to Bruce, and then we'll go back there.
Okay. Thank you. I think one of the, NPS has had goals for years, that every year will improve the number of students who read at a certain level. And they've had activities aimed at those goals. What's really been missing is evidence that those activities really lead to the goals. And so you get a new plan with lots of goals, and then a few years later you look at it and it turns out you're improving in half of them and getting worse in the others. Are you getting to the point where you can start before you spend years and years doing something, have the research evidence that these steps that you're taking will actually help lead to the goals?
Well, that's our goal, right? I mean, our goal is that we don't start anything aimed at any of these issues, or being ready for school, third grade reading, eighth grade test scores, unless we have programs that we know work. And not only do they work, but they work better than other programs that are trying to do the same kind of thing. So I think you're asking, I'm not sure how to respond other than that's exactly what we're trying to do. And are we there yet? No, but that's where we're going.
Are you trying to replicate, I mean, you touched on this earlier, but you use Cincinnati as an example. Is it sort of trying to borrow best practices or what seems to have worked in a Cincinnati or a Portland? Or?
This is the interesting thing. So all of you are probably saying, I've got a great idea. And Cincinnati has a great idea. What we're replicating from Cincinnati is the process, not the solutions, okay? I'm pretty sure that our solutions in Milwaukee are going to be different than the solutions they came up with in Cincinnati. And so someone mentioned Habitat for Humanity and plugging it in. It sounds like a great idea, But we're going to, all the things we do have to be driven by an analytical framework that leads us to a conclusion that this works better than anything else. And so what we have to be careful of is jumping to answers before we've totally gotten through the process of, rigorous examination of what's going on.
First, thank you very, very much for the work that you're doing and your contribution of your time to this effort. It's obviously very important to this community, so thank you for doing that. My question is a follow-up to the one related to the training for new teachers, but what kind of retraining is going on for the existing teachers that exist out there today? I mean, how do we make sure that they're picking up on any of the best practices or initiatives that you guys have identified?
Well, I can just say that, we are probably the biggest retrainer of teachers in the city, and so we are utilizing best practices, not just we're learning from Milwaukee Seeds, but across the country on ways to implement. Again, urban education is somewhat unique, and so there are certain strategies that you need to be implementing, and so there's a lot of research out there, and we're learning from that research and really focusing on making sure that only the teachers we're producing, graduating, but the teachers that are currently in the field, have those tools they need to help students succeed.
Anything you want to add? Bill Hank?
Bill? Yeah, Bill. Yeah.
I just think that there's a lot of professional development opportunities out there. I think MPS has a full court press on in terms of their professional development. And I know within Milwaukee Succeeds, there's a lot of energy, a lot of enterprise related to helping teachers really understand how difficult the teaching process and the learning process is, and what kind of scaffolds do you need in order to be successful. I just would concur with what Mike says. I know teacher education is under criticism all the time, and I would be the first one to tell you that I'd like to see the bad teacher education programs go out of business, but there's a lot of really good ones out there that are doing a really fine job and working scientifically to get better all the time.
Dean Bill Hank, most of you in this room know. He's a College of Education Dean here at Marquette. Yes, sir.
You've asked for our help. I would ask, have you approached the neighborhood associations? As an example, I'm a member of Eastside Milwaukee Community Council. We spread from Edgewood on the north, North Avenue on the south, the lake, and the river. We're now partnering with 2 schools, Riverside and with Hartford. And I think we can do some good, and I think if you approached all the neighborhood associations, I think that would be a ground roots level approach.
I think that's a great idea. Mike, I'm sure you heard that.
No, I mean, that's part of what we're trying to do is how do we engage volunteer groups proactively to be part of it? But what we don't want to do is send a flyer to your organization and say, hey, volunteer, and then everyone shows up and we're like, well, we're not ready yet. We don't know what we want you to do. So, I mean, this is part of we can't put the cart before the horse, but we're going to get there at some point. There's no doubt in my mind.
Let me go back here.
I'd like to know how long each of you has committed to this, because it's a really long initiative, and I'm concerned about maintaining momentum as we go forward.
Well, Mike said we'd be out of here by 1:30. So I've committed 15. Oh, you mean the whole thing? I'm committed for the long term. I don't know how long it's going to be. I mean, this isn't. I don't even know if we have terms. I think we've just all jumped in, and we're here to make it work. So I think it's a long-term effort. I don't want to speak for either of you, but.
I have nothing else to do. I don't work. I don't have a job.
So somehow I find that hard to believe, but yeah. And Mike?
Oh, no, I think that when you think about this, when we all agreed, I remember the first time when Ellen Gilligan came into my office, and she asked me a question. I was very surprised, and I thought to myself, boy, this is a really big problem. It's going to take a long time to fix. And the more I thought about it, I said, I really have to be part of this. And I know it's going to take a long time, and I'm willing to commit my time and effort to see it through.
Mm-hmm. Other
There's
questions?
A question over here.
Young lady in the back. Ryan, you want to? In the pink.
And then there's one over here, too.
Okay. I'll get over here, George. No, actually, I'm going to go back there first.
Too many pink?
I'm sure that's a great question, and we'll get to it in a second. But
Hi, my name is Monica. I'm an MPS graduate, former student, and I'm a senior at Marquette. So I really empathize with your feelings and your just efforts to better education in MPS. I was wondering, with the hefty responsibility of school counselors, is Milwaukee Succeeds utilizing these professionals And if so, what specific roles do they have?
I don't know.
And it's really about more than MPS, right? It's really about all kids in the city of Milwaukee. So I know that the school counselors, I can speak for Metcalf, the school counselor is a part-time counselor, but she is very engaged. But she is not directly involved with MPS activities or with Milwaukee Succeeds activities, but what she does is what Milwaukee Succeeds is all about.
Not to volunteer to add to Mike Soika's workload, but you might see Mike is over here. If you can wave, maybe stop by and say hello to him afterwards, and maybe he can help get some information for you to answer your question. That'd be great. There was one over here, yes, here, and then I'll come back up to you. Mm-hmm. Just hold it down. There you go.
What specific steps have been working so far?
Well, I think the biggest achievement we've had is the traction that these networks are getting. So the network is sort of, what do people mean by it? But a network is a very diverse group of people, organizations, community activists that are working on a specific thing like third grade reading. And these people come together, they meet for long hours, multiple times, and what's I think one of the best outcomes we've had so far is the stick-with-itness, if that's of the people that are in these networks, to keep coming back and putting all this time and effort into a goal that's still, somewhat on the horizon. So these networks have gotten real legs and are starting to make some traction. So that to me is one thing. The other thing would be our what do we call our report card that we sent out?
Milestone.
Our milestone report, which is framing not only the problems in Milwaukee, but for the first time, at least from our organization's perspective, we've laid out what our goals are. So now we have something that we're marching towards. Everybody wants to make education better, but that's sort of a nebulous term. We now have concrete goals that we're working to. So I don't know if you guys want to add anything.
Well, we have 75 partners working with third grade reading. We have 65 that are working on college readiness. I think we have 44 that are working on early childhood, so that's immunizations, making sure kids are ready for school. And then we have another 40 that are working, and these are separate organizations, and then there are another 40 organizations that are working on our, I call it our catch-all one, which is one of the most important ones that deals with safety, social, psychological issues of what our kids deal with day in and day out. So there are a number of people that are working together, and I think just keeping those amount of folks at the table is great progress.
Right. Let me get maybe that one last question there. Yes, go ahead.
Ask about.
Okay, about partnerships. Anybody else have a question? We've got about a minute left.
And then we should say on the Leadership Council, there are 45 people that are on the Leadership Council. Right. 45 different organizations.
You get the
so real quick follow-up to that. When you talk about partners, we've heard, and I've been here at a number of programs, Yes We Can Milwaukee, we talked about the rocket ship schools. We've talked about, we haven't here, but Next Door Foundation is working in preschool reading. Are those the sorts of partner organizations you're talking about? Are those people involved with you?
Yes, I don't think Schools That Can is involved.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, they are.
I'm sorry.
I think all of them are.
Yeah, so COA, any pretty much nonprofit you can think of is available. Teach for America.
Anything else?
Miss Lady in the Pink? In the pink?
Yes.
One more time. United Way of Greater Milwaukee, I know, is a big part of this as well. There's also a way that you can give directly to Milwaukee Succeeds. I'm sorry, but I happen to be working campaign this year as a loaned executive sponsored by Freighter, and this is what I do and I love. So if you're giving to your United Way campaign and you want to give it directly to United Way, you can, but there is also a matching grant from Signal Aldrich to give directly to Milwaukee Succeeds. Right. And it's another way to get more funding coming your way.
Thank you. And as a United Way board member, thank you very much.
Before we go, just a couple of things. We will continue our events next week. On Monday, we have Yale Professor Heather Gerken here. We're going to have a politics of just how local should politics be. I think it'll be a fascinating discussion. Heather will be here with Charles Franklin, who's the Marquette Law School poll director, professor here, and Craig Gilbert, who's the Washington bureau chief for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. So we hope you can join us on Monday. Check in at law.marquette.edu at our website for future events. Yes, we will be doing more polling this year. I do want to mention that, and we'll be doing something later this month. And in the meantime, I just want to say thank you for your interest, for your attention, for your questions, and a special thank you to our guests today, Mike Lovell, Jackie Hurd-Barber, and John Schlitzky. Thank you.